So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Stubbs Gazette HooYu webinar. So we're just going to give it a couple of minutes just to allow for any stragglers to join. And today we'll be starting at 2 minutes past the hour.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Tracy and I'm the CEO of Stubbs Gazette. And I'm delighted to be joined here today by David Pope, who's flown all the way from London today to join us. And David is Marketing Director of HooYu. So we have a great mixture today of both people from the public and private sectors, including banks, credit unions, the legal profession, the accountancy profession, some advisory firms, and we even have some regulators with us today, so you're all very welcome. Now, each one of you will have slightly different challenges and issues when it comes to the whole area of KYC, or Know Your Customer. Between myself and David and the participants, we will hope to try to resolve, or at least to give you some guidance on some of the issues around KYC. So just to give you a bit of background about Stubbs Gazette and how we partnered with HooYu. Stubbs Gazette, as you probably all know, is a bit of a household name at this stage in Ireland. It's been around for almost 200 years. I remember when I was a kid, if I was ever acting the maggot, my parents would threaten to put me in Stubbs Gazette. Now, I didn't know what it meant, but I just knew that you definitely didn't want to be in there. So it's been around for 200 years. It's been kind of made famous in popular culture. It's mentioned in Ulysses. I think James Joyce's father, unfortunately, appeared in Stubbs Gazette about 150 years ago and had profound effects on him. And even Christy Moore mentions it in one of his songs about putting the pubs in Stubbs. So it is a household name. We kind of started off as a publisher where we could probably lay claim to be the oldest credit bureau in the world because the original Stubbs Gazette was a listing of bankrupts and people who had been brought to court for non-payment of bills. It was originally set up by the Irish Mercantile Association. So I think we are, unless somebody disputes it, we are laying claim to be the oldest credit bureau in the world. So over the years, our core business was in credit checking, and we set up a credit bureau and a credit reference agency. Now, in the past couple of years, we've been augmenting our credit checking capabilities with legal and compliance tools, especially as it relates to anti-money laundering and politically exposed people checks. So we offer to do batch checking and online checking for our customers. A lot of credit unions and banks, insurance companies, the legal profession would use us for onboarding new members and using us for doing screening against politically exposed people lists, sanction lists, to see whether they're new customers or existing customers have been convicted of terrorist offences or money laundering offences. Now, so we had our credit bureau and credit reference division. Now we had a kind of an AML compliance regulatory database, which we blended with our credit information. So we were kind of missing one key part of the overall KYC solution, and that was around ID verification and helping our customers to verify their existing customers and new customers, and to be able to collate the proof of documentation and proof of address documentation. So over the past 3 or 4 years, we've been looking at technology solutions in relation to identity verification. And while many companies promised that they could do it in a kind of seamless digital fashion, none of them lived up to their billing, until we were recommended to talk to HooYu by the chairman of our company, who had done a lot of work in the UK with HooYu, and who had integrated the HooYu services with a credit reference agency in the UK. So we met HooYu over a year ago, and I'm delighted to say that they actually far exceeded what they promised to do. And as a result, we've partnered with them for the Irish market. And now we have the complete solution for KYC, so including the know your customer from an anti-money laundering and politically exposed people check, all the way to getting the correct ID verification, documentation, and proof of address. So I guess on to the next screen.
Just to add, if you guys have got any questions today, please ask them via the GoToWebinar panel, which will probably be on the right-hand side of your screen. Just please throw your questions at us as we go through the webinar, and then we'll take questions at the end.
So what we'd like to cover off today, firstly, the introduction to Stubbs and HooYu. We will now look at what are the causes of abandonment at account opening, which is a huge issue for a lot of organizations today. In the UK alone, abandonment rates at onboarding stage are over 50% using traditional methods. So we'll take a closer look at that now.
Okay, so this is a slide that's based on our experience in Ireland, in the UK, and further afield, based on working with financial services companies to look at their account opening processes, and sometimes how Know Your Customer impacts negatively that account opening experience and actually results in abandonment during account opening. Obviously, the impact of that means that less people get across the finishing line, less people complete account opening, meaning that the cost per acquisition goes up, and everybody's operating with a somewhat leaky bucket in terms of their online application process. So whether starting at the left, when the customer comes in to register, to sign up, where possible, financial services firms like to do an identity database check to be able to confirm name, address, date of birth. Works for some markets, not for others. And then at that point, if the customer can't be verified online, then the application tends to slow down. The application tends to get halted. Some customers are invited to come into the branch to hand over copies of identity documents to be able to verify their identity before their account can be opened. Other companies will email the customer a day later, 2 days later, to invite them to reply with copies of identity documents, or to go to a web page to upload identity documents. And then commonly some firms actually will verify or look at and examine those documents in-house, again creating a bit of delay based on seasonality and volumes and the number of people in that team. Ultimately then a decision is made on that customer's identity and the account can be opened. But this latter process, this back office process, tends to take place over the course of a couple of days, which results in abandonment, customers forgetting or getting bored of having made the application, going elsewhere, going with one of the cool new fintechs to have their account opened. At which point, of course, financial institutions are losing customers due to abandonment in the account opening process. The same philosophy, the same process can, of course, be extended to professional services firms, who are also bound by the money laundering regulations and the Criminal Justice Act, insofar as they have to verify the identity of their customers, so they know who their customers are before they can act for them. And again, what we see is that now a lot of companies are wanting to create a smooth digital journey, a smooth online journey for their customers, whether it be onboarding in financial services or professional services, I should say. So this is where it's going wrong at the moment. If we look at where the process could be perhaps be a little bit better, so this is how we like to say that companies can reduce abandonment and make for a smoother online account opening process using the Stubbs and HooYu technology. So again, at the left, we have the customer coming in to begin a registration process. Then immediately within the online process, they're invited into the HooYu identity verification process. So at that point, what we'll do is we'll use the Stubbs identity databases to confirm the name, the address, the date of birth, and some other information about the individual. And then immediately at the same time, step 2 takes place, whereby the customer is asked to provide a selfie, to provide an image of an identity document, to take a photo of their utility bill or tax document, and also perhaps at the same time to give over some information about their online identity from PayPal or LinkedIn or Facebook. HooYu then steps into action and performs a biometric facial verification to compare the face in the ID document with the face in the selfie, to score and analyze that person's digital footprint, to then authenticate the identity document, and to perform a name and address match on the proof of address document to compare that against the name and the address on the application. So HooYu then takes all this information, uses these multiple identity technologies to create an identity confirmation score and an identity confirmation report, which is passed back to the clients in question, and the clients then act on that data to decide whether to onboard that customer and to welcome them as a customer. So that's the process that we're following. We'll do a demo of that shortly, so you can all see the user experience and how that works. But before we get into that, we just wanted to examine some of the issues around this process. We see that many companies currently ask their staff to take copies of ID documents. What we commonly see there is what I like to call the pantomime of security, whereby somebody on the front desk gets a copy of an ID document, shoves it in the filing cabinet, and that's it. That's their notion of customer due diligence. Some companies, of course, do go further than that, and they do try to analyze and look at the ID documents, but at the same time, frontline staff in banks, receptionists at professional services firms are not experts in verifying ID documents from 200+ countries. And at the same time, we know that some banks have in the past been compromised by staff looking to aid and abet organised criminals to do fraud. So Stubbs and HooYu, then, it's our job to be here and to strengthen your processes in the front line against ID fraud, thereby helping you comply with the Criminal Justice Act, but at the same time to reduce account opening abandonment. So one of the things that we always like to do is to look at the regulations in whichever market we're working with, to look to say, right, how can we help our clients to comply with their anti-money laundering compliance requirements? How can we help them comply with their customer due diligence requirements? So this is an excerpt taken from the Criminal Justice Act 2010, and clearly in chapter 33 it talks about identifying the customer and verifying the customer. Of course, those in a legal basis, those are two very, very different things. Coming to know the customer's name and the address is not verification. That's the first part. That's actually identifying the customer. And then the second part has to take place, which is verifying the customer's identity. And the legislation here talks about, on the basis of documents, whether or not in electronic form, that the designated person has reasonable grounds to believe and can be relied on to confirm the identity of the customer. So many different regulations around the world allow for data or documents from a reliable source. There's not that much verification data currently available in the Irish market. So here we're talking, the regulation leans very much towards on the basis of documents, whether or not in electronic form. So of course what HooYu is doing, what HooYu and Stubbs are doing, are verifying these identity documents in an electronic form and helping our clients comply with the Criminal Justice Act. So that's a little bit of context, a little bit of background. Now for a live demo, what can go wrong? So if you bear with me for 1 sec, I'm just going to swap screens and we'll do a quick live demo for you.
And David mentioned about the database is available or not, as the case is in Ireland. In the UK and in other jurisdictions like America, credit reference agencies such as ourselves are allowed to check the electoral register as a basic know your customer check. Unfortunately, in Ireland, we are not allowed to do so. Now, we have been lobbying the government to get special kind of dispensation for the credit reference agencies to allow us to do that basic KYC check, but that's ongoing. And again, in the UK, there's a very good database of deceased people, so it's quite easy to do a mortality check. So fraudsters won't be able to use to steal the identity of deceased people. So again, that's something that we're talking to the authorities about, getting access to that reference database, but we're not allowed to use it as yet.
Okay, brilliant. So so now everybody should be able to see the HooYu website. So this is where our clients come to log in to look at the results of their identity verifications. But what you can probably see from this website is that what HooYu is trying to do is to bring together lots of different kinds of identity technologies. So there's lots of identity companies out there, but by and large they all do something slightly separate. So there's some companies that do database checks, other companies that might do document validation, other companies that might look at your digital footprint to prove information about your real world identity. Other companies do PEPs and sanctions, other companies do facial biometrics. So HooYu then is the first platform to really blend and combine and knit together all these different identity technologies, knitting together, of course, into the Stubbs databases. So we'll go into our dashboard, have a look at some of the verifications. So here's one of my colleagues, Alistair, who did a verification on himself earlier. And this is what a HooYu report looks like. We give overall we give a decision, we give an identity confidence score, and we give lots of information about the sources we've used and what we've actually proved and verified. But rather than get stuck into the nitty-gritty of the report now, if it's okay, I'm going to take a step back and we will show you what HooYu looks like when it's integrated into your website. So here we have a pretend company called TransferPay. Wherever you see the TransferPay logo, just please pretend it's your logo. And so this is your site with your navigation, and your customer has come in and they're ready to apply for an account. If you're in financial services, this is where they've already read the key facts, the legalese, they know what they're applying for, and so they click start to go through the registration process. Of course, it's also worth mentioning that HooYu can be deployed whatever point it is you want in your customer life cycle, whether it be at account opening or it be at a later point where perhaps your customers need to be re-verified. And in fact, the Stubbs and HooYu team will be doing another webinar on re-verification of existing customers in a few weeks' time. But anyway, on to the account opening proposition. So I'm applying for this account with this pretend company called TransferPay. And so it's your site with your navigation, and your customer is applying. So same the world over these days, people don't fill out these tiddly little forms. Instead, their clever device remembers all that lovely data for them, and that arrives nicely in the application form. So nothing to do with HooYu, of course. That's my device that's remembering, my browser that's remembering all my data for me. So now I'm going to pop in my date of birth, and here's my physical address. That. And so now when I press submit, what HooYu will do is we'll go off and check the Stubbs databases in Ireland, or check the credit reference agency databases in the UK. But what really HooYu is here to do is be able to verify the people that can't be verified using traditional database approaches. So as soon as I press submit, yes, those database checks will take place, but what will also happen is that HooYu will arrive inside your website. So we're still in your site with your navigation, but a little bit of HooYu has arrived inside your website. So what HooYu is really about is about creating a great digital customer journey so your customers can seamlessly be whisked through the process, verified, onboarded, and welcomed. So to that end, we're giving a good bit of customer storytelling here to say, hey, this is what's going to be asked of you to go through the process so you can open your account today. And of course, you don't have to use this process, Mr. Customer. Instead, you can go into a branch, travel half an hour to your branch, queue for 20 minutes, and then travel half an hour home, or you can just get it all done online today. So it's unsurprising these days how many people opt to go the digital route. So a little bit around what your customer is being asked for, then I hit get started, and away I go. Now, at this point, if, for example, a lot of your new customers are from Poland or Romania, you can choose, your customers can choose whether that the HooYu content is served in that particular language. So here we can see that seamlessly HooYu is switched to Polish, and in fact, based on the region settings on your customer's device, HooYu will default to whatever language they have enabled on that particular device. So again, HooYu really is all about getting as many customers across the finishing line as possible to be able to complete that account opening process for you. So anyway, my Polish isn't all that, so we're back to English. All we have here is, again, HooYu inside your website with your navigation. When HooYu is summoned into your website, we brand the HooYu elements that come in so it looks and feels like it's a seamless part of your website. So the progress bar across the top, the navigation buttons across the top, the action button, the next button, they'll have static and mouse over colors so that it looks and feels like it's a seamless part of your website. So that's important because we want your customers to think this is you, this is your process, your digital journey, and that you're a great brand for them to be working with. Also, no matter whether the customer is on a cranky 20-year-old desktop PC or an iPhone or a Samsung or a tablet, HooYu renders really, really nicely inside that screen. So here we are, we can start the process. When I'm not gassing on, of course, it takes probably about 60 seconds end to end to go through the process. So let's get started. So I'm now going to take a selfie. So here we are in the Stubbs Gazette office. Here we are in Black Rock. Hello, everybody. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to use that photo. What's happening now is we're doing a wee bit of facial detection on the photo. Can we see eyes, nose, mouth, ears, etc.? And then we optimize that photo ready for the facial biometric comparison process between the face in the selfie and the face in the ID document. Now, this part of the process goes above and beyond the requirements of the Criminal Justice Act, but it's a great form of impersonation detection. So I could try and steal James's wallet. I might have his driving license, but I don't have his face. So it's really trying to prevent identity theft and impersonation. So that's the selfie part of the process. Next, this is our digital footprint analysis. So based on how we all buy and bank and shop and chat away around the internet these days, there's a good source of rich identity data there for us to use to prevent identity theft and to conduct customer due diligence. This sort of information is great as a supporting tool to verify customers. The main requirements, of course, as laid down in the Criminal Justice Act, are documents and identity documents, of course. But what we've done here is we have contracts with LinkedIn, Google+, PayPal, Facebook, Yahoo, Amazon, Microsoft, and a few others besides, such that when the user gives their explicit consent to HooYu accessing some of their data, there's a handshake that takes place between HooYu and LinkedIn, or HooYu and PayPal, for example, and we then get passed back some of that person's identity information. And that can include name, address, date of birth, gender, nationality, email address, phone number, locations. In other words, some really good biographical information that we can use to gain more confidence that this customer is who they say they are. So I'm going to log into my LinkedIn account. Now, I've previously logged into HooYu before, so it's not asking me for my permission in full this time. It's just saying you previously logged in, would you like to continue? So the first time I did it, of course, I gave my explicit consent, and now I'm consenting again to logging in to HooYu via Facebook. And now that handshake takes place between HooYu and Facebook, so we can start to gather the data and perform an analysis on that data. So, of course, we don't take this data at face value. This is a fairly new way of proving someone's identity. So we'd like to really measure and analyze the data. In the instance of Facebook, for example, we look at something like 300 different data points. But some of the more obvious things, for example, are how old is that account and how many people are they connected to? So in other words, is it an account that was made last night for defrauding Bank of Ireland? Or does it have a history go back 2, 3, 5, or 10 years? And are they connected to like 10 other dodgy profiles? Or are they connected to scores or hundreds of people? So what we're starting to do really is to look for normative behavior. There's lots of science, lots of normative distribution analysis in there. One of the other things we do is we look at the amount of content that's gone through the profile. So how many posts, how many albums, how many photos, how many videos, book reviews, and so on and so forth. And we chart that content over the course of time, and we score it. In fact, really recent content will mark down, just in case that's a fraudster who's frantically trying to legitimize this newfound digital footprint that they're going to use. The bit of the analysis that I really like is that we analyze not just how much content that profile has put through, but we analyze how their content has been received by the rest of Facebook, and in fact, how many other profiles have liked a photo, have replied to a status update, and so on and so forth. So in other words, my Facebook stats are that I'm connected to 147 people, but 259 of the other accounts have actually interacted with my content. So mathematically, exponentially, that makes it much harder for a fraudster to create a believable fake digital profile than it does, for example, by getting hold of a fake ID document.
I suppose two important things around the digital identity is that firstly, it's explicitly opted in by the customer to allow us to look at the Facebook data or the LinkedIn data or the PayPal data. And the second thing is that we will only use it for the explicit purposes of verifying somebody's ID. So the data will not be used for any other purposes other than for verifying somebody's ID.
Yeah, exactly. It can only be used for verification purposes, not for affordability purposes or credit preference purposes at all. And of course, it's an optional part of the process. Some of our clients mandated digital footprint analysis on their high-risk applications. Other clients just make this part of the process optional and rely instead on the ID document and the proof of address document analysis. So, onto the document section. So what we have here is, in fact, we've divorced identity documents from address documents. So one of the tenets of electronic identity verification is that the regulators like to see firms using multiple sources to confirm name and address from one source and name and date of birth from another source. So the identity document section here gives a name and date of birth confirmation. The address document section here gives a name and address confirmation. So supposing a particular client didn't want to allow insurance documents or tax documents to be used as a proof of address, then it's a very quick setting that can be turned off in the HooYu backend. So what we're doing here is we're saying, right, what was the name and the address on the application? how well does that match? Can our computer vision technology identify that name and that address on the proof of address document? With the identity document section, what we're doing here is we're validating the security features on the ID document to make sure that's a real government issued ID document. And likewise, again, if a certain client doesn't want to accept travel visas or residence permits, then they just click that off and that doesn't appear. This section can also be used on a risk-based approach. So supposing there's a particular application that was low risk just for a foundation level instrument, and the regulated merchant was happy just to go for one ID document and nothing else, then that's all the customer is required to do before HooYu auto completes and drives the customer onto the next stage in the journey. But supposing there was a high risk application, then in that case, HooYu can be configured to ask for less or more evidence based on the risk that our clients see in the transaction. So in other words, a particular transaction, a particular application could ask for a passport, a driving license, and a proof of address document. Anyhow, I've got my passport with me today, so that's what I'm going to use to verify myself today. So next up is a little bit more user messaging. So again, HooYu is really about ushering the customer through the process to enable them to complete online account opening nice and easily. And so here's a little bit of user education for the customer. So next up, I'm going to press my camera button, take a photo of my ID document. Okay, there we go. So that's a photo of my passport. So as soon as I press use photo, what will happen now is HooYu will do a bit of triage on the document. Our computer vision technology will look at it and try and decide if it is indeed an ID document or if it's a photo of a dog. And if the user's taken a bad photo, we'll give them some dynamic error messaging to say, oh, sorry, use your flash, turn it off. We can see, because we can see a great big reflection mark on the middle of the screen. We'll then start to analyze the document once we know it's an image we can work with. And we have both an automated 30-second technology-led verification process, and we also, if we can't verify it with our technology, we also have a manual agent document expert verification process. So this one's gone through in the first process on automatic. What's happening now is HooYu is exiting the screen and passing the user on to whatever page you have told us to send your customer to next. So HooYu is now left, passed the results of the verification back to you, the merchant, and then sent the customer on their merry way in their digital journey. So this page is no longer a HooYu page, it's your page, whereby you say, welcome, you're now a new member of our credit union, bank, thank you, we're now ready to go through matter inception, so on and so forth, where you decide what process you want to go through next with your customer. So that is the HooYu experience. Now let us, James and I, show you underneath the bonnet so you can see what work has gone on to verify the identity of this dodgy geezer that you see on your screens. So go from there. Okay, so back to the HooYu dashboard. And here's the verification we just did. So here's me in the Stubbs office at BlackRock. And overall, we can see that this person's identity has been confirmed and we have an identity confidence score. So I'll come back to the score at the end, if I may. Here's the range of identity confidence scores that we produced. But the first thing to note is that we've done some geolocation on this person as well. So we've done two kinds of geolocation. One on the IP address of where the user is connected to the internet. So I'm connected to the internet using my phone, which is a UK issued mobile phone, which is why we're getting a UK IP address. But the IP address, the device can be seen here in County Dublin in Ireland. Here's the integrated PEPs and sanctions watch list checking. And of course, Stubbs have all this kind of good data themselves available as their own service, many of which you already use. So this covers the current and previous sanctions lists and so on and so forth. Here is the data checks that we've done. So this particular check has gone against our UK databases. But of course, should you be an Irish client, we would offer you the Stubbs databases as part of this process, whereby you can confirm name and address, name and date of birth, confirm if the customer is over 18, and overall if you've been able to verify that person's identity using the database check approach as well. More on the Stubbs data shortly. And then the other thing we did, of course, today is we verified this person's ID document. So what happened first is we looked at the ID document and we analysed it for image tampering, for forgery, for photoshopping. So one of the things that fraudsters do, for example, is so let's suppose I'm a fraudster called David Pope and I want to become James Tracy. So I would take the A in David, and use that to make the A in James, the E in Pope to make the E in James, and so on and so forth. Then what I might do is I might borrow one of the numbers from the document number to change the date of birth, and so on and so forth. And when that sort of image tampering goes on, commonly we'll detect that we can see the same pixels in more than one place on the same image, so we know that something dodgy is going on there. The next process that we follow is that our technology will compare the data on the face page of the passport with what's in the machine readable zone at the bottom, which is where you have all the funny arrows and letters and numbers. Commonly fraudsters will fall over here because they'll change the data on the face page, but they won't change it in the bottom. So say, for example, if your surname is Pope, you're male, you're British, you're born in 1974, and that means that the 17th character has to be Y, the 3rd character has to be F, 10th character has to be 3, and so on and so forth. Then what we'll do is we will compare the data on the face page with the data in the machine readable zone to say, yep, looks like it's got a valid date of expiry, it's a good document number, and it's a valid date of birth, and so on and so forth. And we check a few other checksums in the machine readable zone. So that's what's happening on our automated check. Now, if the image isn't great quality, or let's say, for example, it's not a document that can be checked with technology, then that passes over to our human document experts, and they will blow that up on their screen. They'll look for further evidence of forgery. They will look for the holograms. Are they the right holograms? Are they in the right place? Are they evidencing hologrammatic quality? Then they will look at the microprints, all the funny little patterns of national flags and landmarks in the background of the document. Then they'll look at the kineogram. So depending on the kind of document and the year of issue and the country of issue, that has been a different place. It could be pinholes whereby the document number is stamped through the penultimate page of the passport. It could be down the right-hand side or the left-hand side with a laser burn, and so on and so forth. Then there'll be a font check, a layout check, and then finally will be a contextual check to make sure that all the security features are working together properly. So, for example, is the hologram on top of the laminate, is the photo underneath the laminate, and is the microprint edging its way across the top of the photo, and so on and so forth. So they're the kind of checks that we go through. And based on the results of those checks, we then ascribe a score to the ID document. So that's fine. So we've done the ID document, we've done the address document, but then we also go a stage further to say, oh, okay, now how well is all this data comparing across the different sources that we've got here? So obviously the HooYu and Stubbs process, it's not just a document validation tool, it's an all-round evaluation of this customer's identity. So what we do is we say how many sources were used, how well did the name, the date of birth, the gender, the nationality, the location, the facial biometrics match across all the sources, and all of that, of course, combines to give a master score. So that's where HooYu comes in on a risk-based approach. If it's a high-risk client, you can mandate that customer is only passed if they get a higher score. If it's a low-risk customer, they get a low score as well. So that's the HooYu process. Of course, HooYu can be used not just in that integrated online process, but also by your back office staff. So let's say, for example, that I was in the operations team at a credit union. I wanted to onboard this customer called James Tracy. I can send him a HooYu request by typing in his phone number here, his email address here, and saying, hi James, further to your recent application to open an account with this credit union, please could you follow the HooYu identity verification process? Then James would receive a text and or an email that's branded as per the brand and the identity and the name of that particular credit union. He'll then be driven to a web page whereby he goes through that similar process we saw a second ago, and he's asked to do a selfie, document validation, facial biometrics, and perhaps say who he gives some information about his identity from his digital footprint as well. So that's the other way to use HooYu. And of course, for your existing customers, here you can upload a spreadsheet of your existing customers, first name, last name, mobile phone number, email address, date of birth, and physical address, and HooYu will go through the same process, issuing those texts and those emails for you, sending a reminder to your customers to help you comply with your customer re-verification requirements also. So that's a very, very quick tour of HooYu. I'm just going to change screens again, so now we can show you how the HooYu Stubbs data is represented back in the HooYu interface. So please bear with us for 1 second while I hand over to James. Okay, here we go. So now I've logged into a different part of the HooYu interface that shows the results of the Stubbs database searches. James, over to you.
Very good. So what has happened here, I have already registered. I've gone through the ID verification process, which Dave has showed you. And now in the background, using the registration data that I've provided to the customer, that is being used then to search our multiple databases. So it is, as I mentioned earlier on, unfortunately we can't reference the electoral register, or there's no decent deceased database that we can reference. But there are other databases that we have built up over time. So for example, if I had been declared bankrupt, we have that information. If I had applied for a personal insolvency arrangement or a debt settlement arrangement and it had been court approved, there would be it would register that there was a protective certificate issued by the court to give me protection against creditors for a 70-day period. We have the most comprehensive database of judgments in Ireland. There's 250,000 judgments, money judgments we have on our database. So if the individual had any judgments, for example, they would come up here. And also then we reference watch lists. So watch lists would indicate whether somebody is a politically exposed person. Now, a politically exposed person can be different for different organizations depending on their risk-based approach. But a politically exposed person would be somebody that's a minister, for example, or a TD, or even related to a minister or a TD. A senior member of the security forces or the Gardaí, senior judges would be considered politically exposed people, and they would require enhanced due diligence. We also reference any databases of known and convicted terrorists and their associates, convicted money launderers and convicted criminals. So it's looking at the credit reference information. It's also from a beneficial owner point of view as well. So some of you are from a legal background here today, or financial advisors, and you would be required to do a beneficial owner check on your new customers and your existing customers. So using the Stubbs database, which we link into all credit bureau or all different companies' houses around the world, we can build up a family tree of financial directorships or shareholdings that your customers may have in Ireland and in other jurisdictions. There's other stuff like disqualified directors in Ireland, for example. This is an unusual one. We get this information from the Office of Corporate Enforcement. Disqualified directors, by and large, have never been directors of companies, or have no intention of ever becoming a director of a company. But by a quirk in the Irish judicial system, somebody who's been convicted of a crime is disqualified from becoming a director, and depending on the severity of what they've done, It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 15 years. Now, we don't have any details of the crime that has been they've been convicted of. All we know is that they have been convicted of crime. We have their name, address, date of birth, and the period for when the disqualification is for. Bankruptcies and insolvencies, we get that from the Insolvency Service of Ireland and also from the Official Assignee's Office. And then the watch lists, then we'll be looking at politically exposed people and sanctions lists. So in this case, we have used a very broad search. We haven't put in any kind of filters on it. So it's looking at James Tracy's around the world. So you will know from the date of birth that none of these actually relate to me because the date of birth is not the same. And the nationalities, there's only one nationality here of an Irishman born in 1942. So these are all false positives. But in terms of doing batch screening for our customers, banks and credit unions in Ireland, we have a scoring system on the sanction and PEP lists. So depending on what their risk-based approach is, so for example, a credit union up in the border area, they might be more risk adverse than a credit union in another location in Ireland because of smuggling across the border and people having accounts in both jurisdictions. So they might decide that to set their kind of PEP checking and AML checking at a higher level. So our score goes from 1 to 100, and typically our customers kind of had anything that scores above 80 is a positive. Anything that scores less than 80 is a false positive. But at least they have the facility to be able to batch match all of their members or all of their customers. And we provide a report back either in CSV or Excel on all of our customers with a relevant score. So that is very important for if you do get a visit from the regulator who's regulating your industry, at least you can show them the report that and you can do it periodically as well. And one of the important reasons for scoring your customers or members is that, for example, anybody that scores over 80 on one of these PEP lists or sanction lists requires enhanced due diligence and would probably require you to closely monitor any transactions that occur in those accounts. So it's quite important from that point of view.
Okay, cool, lovely. So we're getting towards the end of our slot today, so we thought we'd take some questions now. So do please ask us questions through the, where are we? Here we go. Through your GoToWebinar interface. In your browser, it's probably somewhere on the right-hand side of your screen. So do please throw your questions at us. We've got a couple that come in already. So quick question here is, how do you deal with the proof of address parts? So with the proof of address, again, it's done exactly the same way in the ID document, insofar as the customer is asked to take a photo of the address document. And our clients have a setting in HooYu whereby they are able to specify what age of address document they're happy to accept as part of their compliance processes. So our clients can specify 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, etc. The customer is told dynamically within the request process what the acceptable age of document is. So HooYu, then the computer vision, then looks for the date of issue on the ID document and calculates whether it falls within those date parameters. HooYu then looks for the name and the address that we were given by the merchant as part of the HooYu request. We look for that name and address on the address document. And if we can see that name and address, then we say, yep, brilliant, it's a good proof of address match. This person's passed this part of the process. It's important to state that what we're not doing is validating that it's a real bank statement or utility bill. There's not enough security features. There's no security features at all, in fact, to be verified on many proof of address documents. And in terms of maintaining a library of those things, then there's too many different utility companies, financial services institutions, with too many different billing platforms, too many different variations of how those address documents are laid out. So it wouldn't be a fit for purpose process to validate it, to say, yes, it's a real proof of address document, because quite frankly, a fraudster could whip one of those up in 10 minutes on their in Microsoft Word. So that's the process. Somebody's asked if we can demo that as well. One of the Stubbs Gazette team will reach out and demo that part of the service to you. In fact, we'll invite you to go through the process yourself and have a little test of that particular part of the platform.
And just on the proof of address as well, the new driving license that are issued in Ireland have the current address on it, so that can be used if you're requesting your customers use their driving license. And also, if your customers own businesses or directors of companies, we can use the address that they've from the CRO as part of an address verification.
Brilliant. So somebody else has asked, how global is the service? Does it work outside of Ireland? So yes, the document validation service works for 212 different countries around the world. The digital footprint analysis works for all the countries as well. So obviously HooYu is designed as a customer onboarding tool, no matter if you're in Poland, if you're in Ireland, but your customers from Poland or Romania or wherever. So it's designed as a global service. Somebody's asked if we can show the credit reference feature results, please, which I believe James has just done. But again, we'll reach out to you and give you a separate demo of that one for you.
Just in relation to the credit reference feature, I think with the new central credit register, as far as I'm aware, it won't. The new central credit register will not have any financial judgments on the database, nor will it have whether an individual has been declared bankrupt or has availed of one of the new personal insolvency arrangements. So if you are using the central credit register, you will probably need to augment that with other sources of publicly available data, such as bankruptcies and judgments, just to get the complete picture.
Okay, great. So somebody's got their hand up, and I think that they want to ask a question as well. So we'll send you a quick text in the chat to see how we can help you. So the other question, of course, is how long does it take that we've had in as well. So in terms of how long it takes for the document validation, so as you saw on the demo today, it was pretty speedy. We give an average of 30 seconds for the automatic technology. Then 98% of users are done in less than a minute on the automatic, and we also publish SLAs on the on how long it takes for the documents to be verified manually as well. What percentage go through automatic and what percentage go through manual varies from client to client, based on the kind of documents that are being submitted. So yeah, so it's a very quick process. So I think that's it for the questions today. But as ever, reach out to Stubbs. Here's James's details. So James, over to you to wrap up.
So thanks a million, guys. This is the first webinar in a series of webinars over the next year. So if you have any suggestions on any particular item or topic you would like us to discuss in future webinars, please share it with us and we'll do the research and hopefully be able to compile a good educational and informative webinar for you. But we certainly will be in touch. We will be reaching out to people in the legal profession and the financial advisors and accountants within the next week, because I'm conscious today that we are kind of dealing with kind of financial institutions, are very financial institution centric today, and about customer onboarding. But we've developed products and services for the legal profession and for the accountancy profession, because I know you guys are having issues around gathering the appropriate documentation about your existing customers and doing the beneficial ownership checks. So the technologies that we spoke about today are all applicable to the legal profession and the accountancy profession as well. And we will be reaching out to you guys over the next week with how we could help you with your know your customer obligations. And by the way, yeah, thanks a million, everybody today for attending, and thanks for your questions as well. And as I said, we will be in touch. Thanks a million.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.